Hi. Aristotle defined envy as pain at the sight of another's good fortune, stirred by those who have what we ought to have. This rings truer than ever now that Gucci's envy has been long discontinued. Gucci was uber weird around the turn of the century due to all of its financial woes, so they did change ownership a few times during this period, and there are rumors of reformulations. Now, reformulations generally happen when the distributor, who is also usually the manufacturer of the juice, changes. Let's go through a brief timeline of Envy. Envy for Men was released in 1998 and discontinued in 2011. It had a pretty good run. Wella, the Wella shampoos, etc., they were the producers of Gucci perfumes from 1994 till 2004, so they produced Envy from release and for the first 6 years. But you will never see the Wella name on the boxes or the bottles of the fragrance because Wella produced these under a name called Scan-On, which Wella had acquired from another company called Mullins. Sounds like what you'd call a donkey with a head of a chicken. In 1999, 42% of the Gucci company had been acquired by PPR, which stands for, I'm going to mess this up. I'm sorry, French people, but this is too difficult. Pinot Printemps Redoute. I'll try it in my French bit. Pinot Printemps. Anyway, I'll just put it on screen. But that didn't change the fact that Wella was still producing all of the fragrances for Gucci under the Scan-On label. Now, in 2004, PPR acquired 99% of Gucci and the perfumes were then sold to P&G, Procter & Gamble, easier to pronounce. So if a reformulation occurred, then this would have been the most likely date, 2004. And there is a strong chance that it was reformulated again in 2008. Now, to make matters more confusing is that whenever these transfers of ownership happen, the new producer will use up the existing stock until they manage to put the bottles and the fragrances in their bottles with their boxes. So even though Scan-On, I hope I'm saying that correctly, even though Scan-On stopped producing Envy in 2004, you could still find their labels on the bottles and the boxes well after that time. And I think it would have been around 2006 when the text on the bottles and the boxes would have changed. And your only indication as to who would have produced them would have been on the batch codes themselves. Because Wella used a certain combination of letters with numbers as their batch code, but P&G used 4 digits, 4 numbers basically. But during that transition period, there would have been like this weird crossover of batch codes that didn't align to either company. And if yours is one of those, then it's probably during this time. In 2011, Envy was officially discontinued, but that didn't stop Procter & Gamble from selling the Gucci Fragrances division to Coty in 2015, where it eventually turned into shite. Envy for Men was the second fragrance produced under Tom Ford's supervision. Envy for Women, which was released in 1997, a year before the men's one, was the first. By the way, Tom Ford was appointed the creative director at Gucci from 1994 to 2004. A really good 10-year run, which pretty much made his name. But it also means that all the Gucci fragrances that were produced in this time under the Scan-On label would have had his imprint on them. My bottle here is from 2003, so that would make it an original formulation. I've had a curious fascination with, well, not Envy, but those who touted Envy as this magical green liquid, which of course is green on purpose, saying that Envy is well made, masterfully blended and high quality, smells fresh, zingy, warm. Great. But I got a little scientific about it and did some analysis. I did the analysis on all the reviews of this on Fragrantica to see which words popped up the most. Well, the 2 most common words that popped up were Gucci and Envy. No surprise there. But removing them from the equation of the most commonly used words, in 316 reviews, the words were discontinued and bottle, followed a long way later by ginger and incense. and spicy. It kind of made me think about why this fragrance is revered so much. For so long now, I've heard people talk about this fragrance, about how good it was and why Gucci had to discontinue it and that Gucci should bring this one back. So I guess it makes sense that people are discussing its discontinuation and, to a slightly lesser degree, the bottle, more than they're actually discussing the scent itself within all of these reviews. And if you read all of these reviews, there are many references to the past and many words drenched in rose-tinted nostalgia. Now, that's not the sentiment that I remember back in 1998 when Gucci Envy was released, nor the turn of the century when it was actually popular, namely because it was still in production. But back then, we didn't really spend too much time pining for shit from the past. Yeah, look, I knew some adults who would mention the past every now and then, but they still lived in the present with an eye towards the future. Was that because it was the late 90s and the future seemed like an exciting place to go? The internet was really starting to become a thing at that point, and I don't recall any major wars happening. Economies were doing okay, and prosperity was in the air? Anyway, Envy. To me, this is a very nice smell. Is it well blended? Not really, not even for its time. I always found it to be too rough around the edges, and I preferred Carven Homme over it, as it had a much nicer scent profile with more complexity and a better dry down. Is it high quality? Yes and no. I'd say it's middle of the road. It is, after all, designed to be a mainstream and mass appealing fragrance. Longevity is really, really good, as a matter of fact. I get 24 hours off this old bottle. Can you imagine? Do I like the bottle? Yes. Yes, I do. I like it very much. Why? Because it lives up to its name. The large black dome of anonymity cloaking the sliver of green envy that seeps out from underneath. It's literally the best part of this fragrance, and judging by the word count analysis, I'm not alone in that thought. Do I think it's worth the prices people are asking for it? No. And I'm firm on this with good reason. Reason being that those who do end up paying the $1,000 asking price for a sealed bottle of this are going to have to wear this very carefully, if at all. No amount of, oh, it's so beautiful, what a great scent, is going to overcome the fact that you paid that much for a scent that will never be your signature. Not at that price. And not at that rarity. Now, whilst envy is supposed to make the wearer the envy of the crowd, after its discontinuation, all it's done is make the owner of a bottle the envy of the discontinued bottle hunters and collectors. But the most glaring thing is what it's done to the old wearers of this fragrance. It's made them envy the past. And that's something that I don't condone. You can recall the past, you can learn from the past, you can respect the past, but you should never envy it. Envying the past means that you consider it to be better than the present. And that's fine to a degree, but it also means that you consider it to be better than your future, which is not okay. You're going to the future whether you like it or not, and your perspective of it colors your experience. If your past is your best, and there's not much to look forward to, then all you will see is how bad things are and how much worse they're going to get. And highlighted in that future world, sticking out like sore thumbs, are going to be those who are blessed with the good fortune to have what you ought to have. And in this world you might get your wish after all, because you'll be filled to the brim with envy.
Rarity.